Hello, welcome. Can everyone hear me? Welcome to Aquinas College and the 19th season for the Contemporary Writer Series. My name is Linda Nemec Foster. I'm a poet, writer, alum of Aquinas, and also co-founder with my husband, Tony Foster, of the Contemporary Writer Series. So we're so happy that you're here to join us. We have a wonderful presentation for you this evening. The great, the talented, the lovely Mardi Link will be joining us in a bit. But before that, I just want to make sure that everyone has their cell phones off, tablets off. You know what that means. So make sure that you take time to do that. A couple of other things. This is our third presentation this academic year. Our fourth and last presentation will be April 14th, 7:30 p.m., same time, same place. The poet Edward Hirsch will be visiting from New York City, a phenomenal poet, and we hope you'll all join us for that event, April 14th. And also, next academic year will be our 20th anniversary season, believe it or not, 20 years. And we're bringing back 4 of our favorite authors from the previous 20 years. We'll start out in September with Clarence Major, poet Clarence Major from California. In November, we'll have Judith Ortiz-Cofer, a wonderful writer originally from Puerto Rico. In February, we have Louis Rodriguez, who was recently named Poet Laureate of Los Angeles. And then we end in April with Naomi Shihab-Nye, phenomenal poet, memoirist, short story writer, creative fiction writer from Texas. And Naomi was actually in our very first debut season in 1997. So it'll be wonderful to see her again. So without further ado, I want to introduce Vicki McMillan, Associate Professor of English here at Aquinas, who will introduce Mardi Link for us. Vicki?
Hello, thank you for coming. What a wonderful night when we have an opportunity to have such a marvelous writer come down from Traverse City and join us to share her work. Her name is Mardi Link. She is such an interesting woman. My favorite book that she wrote was her memoir, From Broke to Badass, on a northern Michigan farm. Yes, every time I say badass, the students always laugh. But it's true. It was a perfect title for that particular book. But before that, she had such an interesting career. First as a crime reporter, and then she started writing journalistic books dealing with crimes from long ago. She is a graduate of Michigan State University. Her degree is in journalism and agriculture. Holds a master's degree in creative writing from Queen's University. But her experience as a police reporter was really important. It inspired When Evil Came to Good Heart, a comprehensive nonfiction work probing the cold case of a mass murder of the Robinson family at their Lake Michigan cottage back in 1968. This was just the beginning. She's written many wonderful books since then. Her second book, Isidora's Secret, chronicles the disappearance of a nun in 1907, and that came out in 2009. Since then, she has had many other books, including The Drummond Girls. And I think it is just such a joy to have a Michigan writer come and share her mitten adventures with all of us. So please join me in welcoming Mardi Jo Link.
Thank you so much, Vicki, and thank you, Linda. Thank you for inviting me to come, Aquinas. I really am very happy to be here. I give readings all over, so it's a special privilege to me when I get to read in my home state. So because the title of Bootstrapper got some giggles out there in the audience, I wanted to share the story of how that book got its title. And the title of the book is Bootstrapper. The subtitle is From Broke to Badass on a Northern Michigan Farm. And as you can imagine, it was not the proudest moment of my life when I went home and told my parents, guess what? There's a cuss word on the cover of my new book. But here's how it came about. I had always thought that the name of the book would be Bootstrapper, and that would be it. There'd be no subtitle. I was kind of a purist, you know. My book would be like Cher. Wouldn't have any subtitle. And the word bootstrapper was kind of a, I don't want to say an insult, but it was kind of a characterization. I would go to Tractor Supply a lot during what I think of now as the Bootstrapper year, which was the fall of 2005 through the spring of 2006 in the summer. And when I would go to Tractor Supply, it was always to buy chickens, to buy feed, or to ask a question. And at that time, Tractor Supply had a help desk in the back of the store. And I would show up at the help desk, and there was a man named Larry who was always the one at the help desk answering my questions. And one day he got a little frustrated because I tended to always be in his line. And he looked at me, and before I could even ask my question, which now I don't remember what it was, but he said, "You're a real bootstrapper, aren't you?" And I don't think he fully meant it as a compliment. But I thought it sort of summed up that year, and I certainly thought it summed up the book. So when I turned the book into my editor, the title was Bootstrapper. So they showed me the cover, which has an axe on the cover. I love the cover. And my editor called me, and she said, "The book is going to print in 2 days, and we need a subtitle." I said, "I don't want a subtitle. You know, I think Bootstrapper pretty much says it all." And she said, "Have you seen the cover?" And I said, "Yeah, I love the cover." She said, "Well, we cannot publish a memoir by a true crime writer with an axe on the cover without a subtitle. People are going to think either you killed someone or someone killed you," which might be good for book sales, but wouldn't be an accurate representation of the book. So I said, okay, and I gave her some ideas which she didn't like, and she gave me some ideas which I didn't like. And then she said something that really annoyed me. And just to give you a little bit of insight, this was a celebrity editor that I was lucky enough to work with, but I was kind of the redheaded stepchild. She had a lot of famous authors and me. So, you know, I was always kind of like wanting more of her time, and I was always kind of felt like I was at the bottom of the heap. So there was already a little bit of conflict there, even though she was a brilliant editor. And so she said, "Well, listen, we just published this book that is selling gangbusters. It's called Wild. Have you heard of it?" And I said, "Yes, I've heard of it. I mean, it's a book that's been on the bestseller list for years. It launched the career of Cheryl Strayed, the writer. It's a beautiful, terrific book. It also has a white cover with a very arresting image on the cover of the book." I said, "Yes, I've heard of Wild." And she said, "Well, we want a subtitle for Bootstrapper with the same rhythm as the subtitle of Wild, which is From Lost to Found on the Pacific Crest Trail." Now, that's terrific, great, but no writer, even the ones at the bottom of the heap like me, want to be compared to another writer or want to be told what to do. I think sometimes that's why we become writers in the first place, because we're not good at being told what to do. And so I said, fine. How about From Broke to Badass on a northern Michigan farm? And she said, perfect. So I just wanted to start tonight by telling you that's why there's a cuss word on the cover of my book. So tonight I'm going to have 3 readings from Bootstrapper, different parts, one from early in the book, one near the middle, and one later. And then I thought I'd read a little bit of a piece that isn't published, nobody's really seen, and it's new. So that's sort of exciting for me to read something new. Bootstrapper is about my first year as a single mom. I had 3 kids. They were 7, 12, and 14 at the time. The divorce was a surprise to me, and we lived in a farmhouse. I wanted to continue to raise my kids in that farmhouse, and I was unemployed. So that's where we begin. Is if you know Traverse City at all, you know we have something called the Cherry Festival. And my kids wanted to go to the Cherry Festival regardless of the divorce or the fact that I had no money. So we're going to start with the Cherry Festival. We arrive at the carnival, and a sign on the ticket booth reveals a lucky break. Today is Kids' Day, 20 tickets for $10. The ride requires 3 or 4 tickets each, so if the boys spend all their money on tickets and none on corn dogs, they will have enough for 5 or 6 rides. Tell you what, I say, handing them each a $10 bill. You guys buy your tickets out of this, and I'll get you a snack later at the farmer's market. They agree, and after barely an hour, Owen and Will are out of tickets, but Luke still has all of his. He's figured out that he isn't going to be able to go on all the rides, and he can't decide which ones he wants to go on the most, so he hasn't gone on any, not one. Honey, you have to choose now, I tell him. Your brothers are all out of tickets. Can we just walk around and look one more time, he asks. We walk around the Ferris wheel and the haunted pirate ship, past the potato sack slide, the zipper, and the twister, and then Luke leads us over to the games. He eyes an old woman smoking a cigarette and holding a BB gun, standing expressionless underneath a rack of stuffed snakes, looking like some kind of Annie Oakley of the undead. 5 tickets, cowboy, she says in a monotone. 5 tickets and win this here snake for your girl. Can she not see that Luke is only 12 years old? A slight and young 12 years old? But he hands over 5 of his tickets, and she tacks up a piece of white paper with a red star printed in the middle to the back of her booth, loads a plastic rifle with the BBs, and passes it to him. Shoot out all the red, she explains. That's how you win. Luke takes aim just like I've seen him do at home, with his bow and arrows and his own BB gun, and starts shooting. This cheap rifle is locked on automatic, though, and shoots like a toy AK-47, wasting a lot of the BBs as soon as he pulls the trigger. I think, so that's the trick. This is exactly why I didn't want to come to the games, and I'm just about to intercede, to tell the old woman that this is a ripoff, and my son wants his tickets back, when I change my mind. The past couple of days have reminded me that life is full of ripoffs. Luke might as well learn that now as later. Better luck next time, cowboy, she says, reaching for the gun. Before I can stop him, Luke tears off 5 more tickets, holds them out to her, and jams the remainder into the back pocket. She snatches them from his hand with surprising speed. Okay, she drones, we got a shooter here, shooter. A few people drift over. She tacks up another paper target with another red star. And then I watch my middle son spread his slim legs apart a little, steadying himself, and take a few deep breaths. He exhales, holds the rifle up to his cheek, and stands there for what seems like a really long time. Someone in the crowd coughs, and the old woman rolls her eyes and sighs. Come on, Luke, Owen whispers from behind him, irritated. I mean, geez. Luke takes another breath, exhales again, and stands as still as if he were frozen to the spot, even in this July heat, and pulls the trigger. A thin circular line quickly appears around the outside of the red star. Seconds later, the star drops out of the target like a dead duck, flutters, and lands on the ground. All that remains tacked to the back of the booth is a white rectangle with a jagged hole in the center, not one speck of red. Luke figured out the trick all on his own and beat it. You don't start inside the star and try to remove it piece by piece, because there will never be enough ammo for that, no matter how good a shot you are. No, you conserve your ammunition and make every shot count. The old woman rips the target down, takes a drag on her cigarette, and looks at the paper herself this time, instead of showing it to Luke. Winner, she says, exhaling. Then she yells, winner, at the people passing by. The small crowd that has gathered claps politely, and a big man in a trucker hat steps up to the booth, holding out his own strip of tickets. The old woman climbs up on a step stool and pulls down a bright green stuffed snake with white triangle teeth and hands it to Luke. Up close, it's pretty big. He doesn't say anything at all, just grins. Cool, Owen says, grabbing the animal's fuzzy head and looking it in the eye. Wow, Luke, Will cheers, bouncing around his brother in a circle. Can I hold it, huh? Can I? I want to hold it. Nope, Luke answers, wrapping the snake around the back of his neck over his shoulders like a yoke. I put my arm around his waist and pull him to me while we walk away from the booth, pressing my cheek to the top of his blonde head. Luke is a boy filled more with action than talk. He is my introspective son, an old-fashioned boy of aiming and exploring and building campfires and carving wood with tools in a new-fashioned world. I have bonds with his brothers too, but this is the one I have with him. Acceptance of our outmoded life skills, moon gazing, gardening, shooting, is something Luke and I have in common. Together, I believe we could have survived the wagon trip, the American frontier, and even the Dust Bowl. That was amazing, I tell him. He looks up at me and grins his happy boy grin. I can't wait to tell Dad, he says. I feel my chest tighten. I bought him his BB gun and his bow and arrows. I showed him how to shoot them, just like my dad showed my brother and me in our backyard when I was about Luke's age. I tore apart a cardboard box, painted a target on it for him, and tacked it up on a couple of hay bales. All me. Why don't you call him and tell him about it when we get home? I forced myself to say. I am the one divorcing their father. They're not. This seems like an easy concept to grasp until it is you that has to do the grasping. The last of Luke's tickets are sticking out of his back pocket. He still has 10 left. In the excitement of winning, we've forgotten all about them. What do you want to do with those? I ask him, pointing. We are standing in front of the bumper cars. The sound of squeaking rubber and humming electricity and laughter emanates from inside the ride. There's a steady line for the next go-round, but it isn't very long. I want to go on these with Owen and Will, he says. The bumper car ride costs 3 tickets. Paying for his brothers to go on the ride with him will leave him with just 1 ticket out of his original 20. You can't go on anything with 1 ticket. He already knows this, he says, and doesn't care. He just wants to crash cars with his brothers. That is just like him, my kind-hearted, fine-boned middle boy, always thinking of everyone else first, the peacemaker who just happens to have really good aim. I am oblivious to anything else right now except my happy sons and how fun this day has turned out to be, despite my initial misgivings. And so the next few moments unfold like the clicks of a Viewmaster. The tiny square scenes a mystery until they arrive, one after the other, right in front of my eyes. Just as Luke is climbing the steps toward the bumper cars, a long white arm reaches out from the crowd. The arm snatches the tickets from Luke's hand, and Luke's face collapses in confusion. The body to whom the white arm belongs is running. He is running toward me, and then he is almost to me. This is an arm that never sees the sun, never works in a garden. There is an ornate cross tattooed on the arm and letters, a word on the knuckles of his right hand. The white hand that just ripped Luke's tickets out of his small one and is stealing them away. Tickets I bought with a $30 I can't afford, we can't afford. The knuckle word is spelled A-V-E-D. What is A-V-E-D, I wonder? Some drug gang? Click, 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 goes the Viewmaster. I see gold necklaces swaying in the V-neck of the thief's basketball jersey. Then I feel, more than see, that jersey gripped in my own fist. A man's chin is level with my forehead, and my eyes meet his shoulders. I'm tall, but I have to look up to be face to face with this pale, pimpled skinhead with a scar on his neck and a lip ring. He smells bad, of liquor, something sweet like peppermint schnapps, and old sweat. Shit, lady, he shouts, trying to jerk away. He doesn't release the tickets, though, and I don't let go of his jersey. My whole hand hurts, or maybe it's just my finger. Give my son back his tickets, I say, quiet, because I don't want to upset my sons. I don't want to cause a scene that could ruin this good day. My sons are 20 feet away, still in line for the ride, but their eyes aren't on the cars, they're on me. They look scared now and not confused anymore. It was just a joke, lady. The skinhead is trying to jerk away, really, really trying. And he is strong, but not that strong. Give my son back his tickets. My hand really hurts now. Bumper cars are stopped. Strangers are looking at us, then looking away. Nearby, a ride shaped like a giant strawberry is still spinning around in its well-ordered circle. Happy music plays. Then this person, this skinny, stinking person, looks around and for the first time maybe registers that we are in a crowd. He throws the strip of tickets toward Luke, mutters, "Bitch," and when he lets go, I see that his thumb is part of that word, that knuckle word. There is an S tattooed on it. The letters on his thumb and fingers spell out SAVED. From what, I wonder? Then think, from us, if you're lucky, from me. If I have ever felt this kind of rage before, I don't remember it. We are fine for the rest of this month and most of the next, as long as nothing breaks and needs repair, nothing wears out and needs replacement, no one gets sick or hurt, and nothing unforeseen happens. This is something unforeseen. The tickets are on the ground now, about to be stepped on and probably torn and ruined, but they're too far away for me to pick them up. Even if they were close enough, my hands tremble so badly that I couldn't do it anyway. Owen can, though, and he walks over, grabs the tickets off the ground, and hands them back to Luke. My sons stare at me, open-mouthed. 1 minute, their mother is talking to them about regional agriculture. The next, she is a second away from pressing her green thumbs into a thief's offending eyeballs. I unclench my fists and look down at my hands. The ring finger on my right hand is beginning to swell, and half the nail is torn completely off. The place where it was a few minutes ago is white, and then blood rushes to the surface in pools. I didn't feel it tear off, and I have an odd thought of wondering where it is. I turn my hand over and see that the nail is stuck whole into the skin of my palm. I was gripping that basketball jersey so tight, I tore out my own fingernail. The gate for the bumper car ride swings open, but my sons are still staring at me. They step aside and let the rest of the people in line go ahead. Luke is holding his tickets with both hands, and the snake he won is still wrapped around his shoulders. I put my right hand behind my back so they don't see the blood. Nod a couple of times and try and give them a smile. "Go on," I motion. "Go on the ride." They are the last ones through the gate, but finally take their places in the bumper cars, and the operator starts it up. The other riders grin and yelp, but my sons' faces are flat and serious. Somewhere behind me, I hear chuckling, then deep laughter. I assume it's sarcastic, hurtful, and whirl around, but this laughter is sincere. Just two old men in khaki pants and straw hats, tourists, fudgies, we locals call them, leaning against the snack trailer, bent over and holding their stomachs. "We was gonna help," one gasps, his mouth open in a smile wide enough for me to see the gold wiring on his partial. "But we seen you had it handled." I had it handled? These men are old. They should know better than to believe everything they see. Because now I understand that I don't have anything handled, not a blessed thing. The four of us are just one swipe away from losing everything. The farm, the myth of divorce being survivable, the idea that I can protect my sons from everything, from anything. Our whole lives feel scored together as temporarily as those carnival tickets, just waiting to be torn apart. So it starts out pretty dire. And during that year, we had a lot of things to be concerned about besides money. And one of those was heat. I live in a farmhouse, and on the deed it says 1899 plus or minus. So the house is so old, the people who built it can't even remember what year they built it in. The basement is half cement block and half just stacked up rocks. It's old and it's drafty, and it was very difficult to heat that year. So I devised a family bonding activity called Watching for Wood. So this next section is about what watching for wood actually is. "There's one," Luke says from the back seat. We pull over to the side of the road. Luke jumps out, clicks open the minivan's back hatch, grabs the log he spotted from the window with two hands, and tosses it in. He's back inside, smirking at Will, and we're underway in less than 10 seconds. Up front, Owen has disappeared into his iPod headphones. "That's 6 for me and only 2 for you," Luke says to Will, clicking his seatbelt back into place in one smooth motion. "So?" This has become Will's standard response to his brother's relentless one-upping. In a year, this will turn into, "and I care because." But for now, he sticks to this single-word defense. It usually works. Not much you can do to escalate your own perceived awesomeness when it's received by your little brother with only a sigh, a bored sideways look, and a "so?" I file this realization away for future use. Yes, I am the kind of woman who is not above using juvenile tactics in adult conflicts. Nor am I above driving around our township in search of firewood that has fallen off someone else's truck, and having my children get out of the minivan to retrieve it. That's right, I will stoop that low. I am a stooper. We should have been doing this all summer, and I'm not sure how much wood we can amass before the snow flies, but we're going to make a run at gathering as much as we can. I hauled dead trees and down branches up the hill from the valley, piled them next to the shop, and then the boys used various techniques to hack them into pieces that would fit inside our fireplace. Sometimes this involved the hatchet, but sometimes it just involved leaning the branch or rotted tree trunk up against the cement foundation of the Quonset hut, climbing up and standing on it, then bouncing up and down until it broke into approximation of the right size. Kindling could be broken up by hand, snapped in half over a knee, or cut up with a couple of swipes of the handsaw. This wood cutting went on for several afternoons. The boys would get off the school bus at the end of our driveway, run inside to hang up their jackets and put away their lunch boxes, then come back outside and go straight into Paul Bunyan mode. With the industry shown in these after-school wood-cutting sessions, it was only a couple of weeks before we ran out of dead trees small enough to cut up with a hatchet and a handsaw. I don't have a chainsaw, and I don't want one either. There are actually a very few things that I'm truly afraid of, and a chainsaw is one of them. "Pull over," Will says from his seat directly behind me. He is already unbuckled and sliding open the van door before I've come to a full stop. In my rearview mirror, I see his stocky little legs pumping, his bare hands balled up into fists and urging him forward like pistons as he runs toward a whole bunch of logs scattered alongside the road. There must be 15 or 20 of them, pretty logs too, seasoned and split and fireplace ready. Luke looks over his shoulder and out the back window. "Whoa," he says, impressed with his little brother's score. "The Mother Lode." We are stopped on a curve in the road, a curve that must have been too much arc for at least one truck that came through here recently, overloaded with firewood. "Unbuckle," I tell Luke. He can't carry all that by himself. "Owen, you too." So far on today's excursion, Owen has been incommunicado, his iPod functioning much like an invisibility cloak. "What about you?" Owen asks. Good question. What about me? And soon all 4 of us are stooping over the stray logs like a murder of crows at a fresh roadkill banquet. I guess I am no longer above jumping out of the van myself and picking up unclaimed firewood. I guess I am not too proud to log pick after all. For a moment then, I see my family as a stranger driving past might see us through his car window. We are a tall, blonde woman in a thin pink Goodwill sweatshirt that bears the slogan, "Barbie dumped Ken," in white stitched-on script. The dark roots of her hair have grown out too far, poverty or carelessness or both, but certainly not a fashion trend. She loads her arms up with firewood, stacks it high until she's holding the top log in place with her chin. Her eyes are wide, the whites big like a scared dog. This drive-by stranger couldn't know that she's scanning the top log for wolf spiders, but they couldn't miss seeing that she is accompanied by 3 boys. The smallest boy has a runny nose and his coat is unzipped. He has to run to keep up with the woman, which he does. This is an almost impossible task since he is little, and since he carries a big log under each arm, but somehow he manages. The middle boy stays back at the pile and loads logs into the outstretched arms of the biggest boy. This middle boy is wearing a black hat, a black t-shirt, and black gloves with holes in some of the fingers. There's a quilted camouflage vest, too big for him, snapped up over a t-shirt. He's thin enough to be called skinny, and yet there are wiry muscles in his bare arms. Once the biggest boy has taken on the largest load of logs, he walks with purpose toward the minivan, chin up, an intense gaze focused straight ahead. He's appropriated all the accoutrements of a teenager: longish hair, acne, braces, an iPod, and an aura of mortification, imprisoned as he is by his present company. One by one, this foursome heaves their load into the back of the minivan, the biggest boy taking time to steal a look around before he disappears inside. The woman and the little boy follow, but the middle boy adjusts the wood, shuts the van's rear door, and in one last pull, his own door is closed. Then these vagabonds drive away, spewing gravel from bald back tires. This is us. This is what we look like. There is an old saying favored by people who live in cold climates and deem wood the superior heating source over all the others: fuel oil, electric, propane, even natural gas. Because it is the only one of these that heats you twice, once when you cut it and again when you burn it. This is a truism even when you don't actually cut the wood yourself. I know this because my face is flushed hot, and I'm all heated up inside just thinking about us there, out in the open, on the side of the road. You would be surprised by how few people in states other than Michigan know that saying about heating with wood. It's really unique to Michigan. So besides the heat consideration, that year another big consideration for us was food. And we lived on a farm, so we had pigs, we had a big garden, and we decided to raise chickens. So what I didn't know, and if some of you have been raised on a farm, you will find my lack of knowledge amusing. There are two different kinds of chickens. There are egg chickens and there are meat chickens. I didn't know that. I thought you just got chickens. So when I went to Larry and ordered chickens, I got both. Some grew into layers and some grew into meat chickens. So the last reading here from Bootstrapper is about the chickens. After a summer of doing nothing but eating and scratching and clucking and fertilizing, our hens are finally laying eggs. And Larry was right too, because their eggshells are an amazing blue and green. The yolks, though, are bright orange, and for the next several days, I feed the boys our own scrambled eggs for breakfast. They taste the way fresh grass smells and are better than any supermarket egg ever. With Mrs. Donahue gone, the rest of the hens stick close together, and though they wouldn't be laying eggs at all if they were overly stressed, I can still tell they would rather be inside the coop, at least at night. The meats aren't about to let that happen. An unsuspecting visitor would never mistake our farm for the Big Valley television show with them roaming free. No, they'd think they'd been dropped onto the set of a horror film, starring a cast of zombified birds. The meats seem like a completely different species, bulked up to the size of steamer trunks and bulging now if unmentionables were hidden inside. They weigh as much as bowling balls, and their skinny legs wobble under the strain. Not only that, but there are piles of chicken crap everywhere you step. So much for containing this byproduct to use as fertilizer. And if you bend over to wipe off your shoe, expect an attack from the rear. These, I am convinced, are the foul descendants of the rooster whose crowing in triplicate signaled Jesus' impending betrayal. I make a farmeress decision. It's time for them to die. I cut recipes for chicken pot pie out of the newspaper and plan on a stuffed chicken instead of a turkey for Thanksgiving this year. I know exactly which chicken I want to invite to our table for the holiday. The one with a thing for ankles. I'll fix your little red wagon, pal, I promise. My brother gave us his freezer. It runs fine, and I have big plans to pack it full of legs, thighs, breasts, and roasters. I consider calling Pete to do the deed, decide we are not yet to this place in our new relationship, and sit down with the Yellow Pages instead and look up butchers. It takes a few phone calls, but someone finally explains that I'm not going to be able to find a commercial butcher to come to my farm and slaughter my chickens. Michigan's legislature has outlawed farm calls, which means meat retailers are no longer allowed to come to your farm and kill stuff. Now you either have to kill your livestock yourself or take it to a USDA-inspected meat processing plant. The closest one to me is outside Grand Rapids, 160 miles to the south. The prospect of 3 hours of highway driving, accompanied by 15 angry bowling balls with feathers, beaks, and leg spurs, is not a trip I relish or even contemplate. I've got to talk to Larry. Land's sakes, girl, he bellows from the help desk, tiring by now, I'm sure, of my relentless questions. You can kill a chicken. Get a funnel, stick the heads in, chop them off, let them drain, parboil the feathers off, gut them, bag them, and toss them in the freezer for the winter. I have been reliving the gruesome scenario ever since I was 12 years old and unwittingly scarfed down Thumper's deep-fried hindquarters at my Grandma Link's kitchen table. What made me think that I am any different at 45 than I was at 12? I couldn't kill a hog last fall, and I don't think I can unleash the big S today on a chicken either. Maybe I would be able to kill one if it had on a black balaclava and was coming at me in my bedroom in the dark with a knife. But I know myself, and I know I cannot kill 15 chickens. Not without years of therapy anyway, and I don't have that kind of time. As brutal as my foul charges have turned out to be, I still raise the meats from tiny babies. I can eat them, but I can't murder them, hypocritical as that may be. Instead, I stop at the cashier on the way out of Tractor Supply and pay for another 40-pound bag of chicken feed. The meat portion of our chicken raising experiment has obviously gone off the rails. Just when they were beginning to relax with Pecker gone, my sons are being attacked in their own yard again, our entire wardrobe of footwear is ruined, and at $11 a bag for feed, the costs are mounting. Maybe, I think, there is someone non-commercial who would consider doing the deed. I call the 4-H, the local food co-op, an organic rabbit farm, and a commune in the next county. Will anyone butcher my chickens? Too late, don't do it, too messy, and dude, we're vegans, are my answers. I let the meats roam during the day and they stray to a distant neighbor's yard and scratch up her landscape mulch. She no longer waves when she sees me at my mailbox. Their drumsticks, I am convinced, are getting tougher by the day, and they have pecked all the grapes off my grapevine. They drink the water out of my landscape pond and terrify the koi. Even the stray cats fear them. On a day I shoo the meats out of the road where they have stopped traffic, my brother has apparently gotten his driver's license back because he arrives for an impromptu visit. Those are pit bull chickens, he says, hurrying into my house and slamming the door. I hug him. Please kill them, I say, thinking of his gun collection. Finally, a solution. Why didn't I think of it earlier? Ben is the consummate fisherman and hunter. If you go to his trailer for dinner, you will be served fish or game. Might be bluegill, might be lake trout, might be venison, might even be rabbit, but it will be tasty and it will be something he shot or hooked or trapped or snared. Once when I opened his refrigerator door on a whim, I found a 6-pack of Schlitz and a foil-wrapped mass shaped exactly like a squirrel, tail included. Bacon wrapped, he said, they ain't half bad. Ben is not a working man whose hobby is hunting. He is a hunting man whose hobby is working. Butchering chickens should be like flicking June bugs into a bucket for him. No problem, he says. My brother can do the big S. At last, a chicken hitman has not only been identified, but contracted to. What a relief. But 3 days later, despite frequent reminders from me, the meats are still roaming the countryside like a gang of Nazi youth. And while I'm out running errands, my brother packs up and leaves for bigger game. He's meeting some buddies farther north to scout deer blind sites for fall. All the beer in my refrigerator is gone. That is the way of the hunter. I have now been betrayed by my government, local merchants, the 4-H, the hippies, and even my own family. For this, I am not above asking for help. God, I pray, before I go to sleep that night, please smite the meats. Smite them hard and smite them now. The next morning, when I open my front door, they are on the threshold. I call the newspaper and pay for a one-day advertisement to run on Saturday in the classifieds. It contains my phone number and simply reads, free, live meat chickens, you pick up. On Saturday morning at 6:30, the phone rings. You still have chickens, a man asks. Yes, I still have chickens, I answer. Please, in the name of all that's holy, come and get them. I will, he replies. The day scratches on without chicken removal, but after dark, just as I have given up hope, a small pickup truck pulls into the driveway. Our dog Friday barks as if signaling the apocalypse, and there's a knock on the door. I open it and see a muscular and handsome middle-aged man in jeans and a trucker hat. He has black hair and black eyes. I am here, he says. He is my savior. I grab a flashlight. The door to the pickup truck opens, and 2 young men, an old woman and a little girl, get out. The apostles, I think. We walk to the coop where the meats are sleeping. My poor hens are huddled together as usual just outside. The 2 younger men are dressed as if they were about to appear in a music video. Oversized leather jackets and baggy jeans, chain wallets, baseball caps turned to the side. They cross their rangy arms over their chests. They so do not want to be here boxing up free chickens. One look from the Savior, though, and that is what they do. The old woman is expressionless, but she nods to me and I nod back. I smile at the little girl and she turns her face into the hood of her jacket. They speak to each other in Spanish. The man, my Savior, is the only one who speaks to me. My family eats well tomorrow, he says, and shakes my hand. All spring and all summer, I was raising meat for them, and I didn't even know it. I thought I was doing something for myself and for my family. I wasn't. I was doing something for him and for his family. It has taken us a whole year. 12 full moons have come and gone, but our circumstances have shifted just a little. My moon is waxing now, not waning anymore. A year ago, I would have served the wild turkey that Owen hit with our car, and now I'm giving away good meat to a family that might need it even more than we do. This, I think, this present moment, this is what a good harvest feels like. It wasn't only a farm that needed saving a year ago, it was a family. It was the 4 of us. My Savior, the apostles, and the meats all get back in the pickup truck and drive away. I watch until their taillights disappear at the end of my driveway. I shine the flashlight into the coop. The hens have already moved back in and snuggled together in the nesting boxes. I think back to when they were just baby chicks, just yellow cotton balls with eyes. Maybe God thinks of me and my sons this way. Safe and sound, I say. We are all safe and sound. So I get asked all the time what I'm working on now, and I have something brief to read that concerns what I'm working on now. After I dealt with an empty nest, I needed something to fill my time, and my husband suggested genealogy, because I am of the age now where history is actually starting to seem interesting to me. And me doing a genealogy search is a little more difficult than it is for most people because I was adopted and my adoption was closed. So it never occurred to me that I had a right to know my genealogy, but I do know my birth mother's name. I had searched for and found her. She's since died. And so after all of our children moved out, my husband suggested that I do some genealogy, which I have done and found just some really amazing things about my past. And what I'd like to read to you is a new piece. It hasn't been published anywhere. I've actually never read it out loud before. and it concerns how I got interested in genealogy. And it's called The Pilgrim and the Lady. Not all the pilgrims came here for religion, my husband Pete pronounced one evening from his throne, AKA the velour club chair in our living room. Some of them were here for jobs. Oh, I mumbled from the kitchen with, I have to admit, limited enthusiasm. I'd heard this one before and would surely hear it again and again. A happily married couple, Pete and I are living proof that opposites attract. He is an ancestry junkie with well-documented heroic blood pulsing through his veins, a man who knows almost everything about his past. I am an adoptee who, until quite recently, knew almost nothing about mine. Take John Alden, my beloved continued, tapping two manly fingertips on the precious spiral-bound family tree sitting open on his lap. Yes, I agreed. Do. Take him. Anywhere. Lord, I love my husband, but did you have to make him a Mayflower descendant? Did you have to make his ancestor the comely, the youthful, the strapping historical celebrity that Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote poetry about? Okay, I said, banging a wooden spoon into a pan of gruel, dinner. What about him? Well, he was the ship's cooper. You know what a cooper is, right? Let me think. Maker of barrels to store warm beer, perhaps? The carpenter, my husband bellowed before I could answer. He made the barrels to store the beer. No doubt he had to sample the wares on the way over, too, chuckle, chuckle. And you know what? We wouldn't even be here. America wouldn't even be here if John Alden hadn't been such a great craftsman. The ballast on that logic seemed top-heavy, and yet it was also the part that always got me. Like his famous ancestor before him, my husband was a carpenter. He preferred the term cabinet maker and was masterful at it. The same hands that turned the pages of his family tree, the same hands that had slipped a pear-shaped diamond ring onto my finger, had also built bird's-eye maple vanities that could have held their own in a museum. And Victorian-style houses so intricate, his workers had even nicknamed one the piano. Pete has an innate talent and knows exactly where it came from. I am a random assemblage of cells dropped to earth by aliens. You should research your family tree, my husband suggested. Look at your perfect skin, your apple-y cheeks. Evidence he was certain that I'd descended from royalty. Maybe, I said, thinking scullery maid, laundress, or yard girl was probably more likely. Everyone in the modern day can't be kings and queens and founders of countries. Someone, lots of someones actually, have to be plebeian. I was probably that. I did not tell John Alden's great-grandson to the 35th power what else I was thinking, which was, on the off chance my imaginary forebears were royal and had drifted to the New World, his ancestors and mine hadn't liked each other much. What with King James harrying the Pilgrims out of the land, then having the gall to monogram his name all over their separatist Bible. You do know your birth mother's name, my husband pressed, and with the massive data that's out there now, I bet that's all you'd need. I'd seen the television commercials. I saw how easy it was to leaf out your family tree, and I had to admit I'd been tempted. Many years prior, and with my adoptive parents' blessing, I'd searched for and found my birth mother. Our reunion had been strained, and she'd since died. So it wasn't like anyone was out there wagging a finger at me to keep my past a secret. No, I think I was just afraid of what I might find. After all, the Victorian era held far worse fates for a maiden than a scullery brush. I'll think about it, I told him. In the days following our conversation, I actually had a hard time thinking about anything else. Our children were recently grown, and I was not adjusting very well to our empty nest. I needed something happy to take my mind off my melancholy. What could possibly be cheerier than dead relatives? One day, my husband went to work in his woodshop, and I went to work on my computer. I expected the online ancestral databases to be a welcome distraction. I did not expect to find 3 maternal ancestors named, no kidding, welcome. Welcome Ussery Allman, born 1806. Welcome Ussery Allman, born 1846. Welcome Ussery Wallace, born 1930. And as far as I could tell, none of these optimistically named forebears had royal blood, unless you counted Welcome Wallace's youngest daughter, Eugenia, who his obituary said he affectionately nicknamed Queenie. My hemoglobin is not titled, I told Pete that night over a dinner fit for commoners. Keep looking, he'd said. I did. And the very next day, pay dirt. Well, pay soil. I found Freshkin, my 70-something times Flemish adventuring grandfather, a man so legendary he'd only needed one name like Bono or Sting. Freshkin helped King David the Saint crush Scottish rebelling tribes in 1150, married into the royal house of Moray, and was given a title and a castle. Said castle had been crumbling into the soil of northern Scotland since 1705, but still, a castle, a bloody castle. There were actual photographs of it all over the internet and everything. "Kneel, Pilgrim," I commanded as my husband stepped out of his work truck. I'd met him in the driveway, knees dirty, my scepter and oscillating garden hoe held proudly aloft. Once inside, I opened the drawbridge to my fortress, AKA my laptop, and with an aristocratic flourish, gestured to the color photograph of my kingdom. "Behold," I said to him, "my castle." Even with its mighty stone walls yielding to the force of history, Duffus Castle was still magnificent, one of the finest examples of a Mott and Bailey castle in all of Scotland. Duffus once had a stone hall, a grand house, and was a veritable fortress, its curtain wall 14 feet thick. When I looked at it, I heard hoofbeats and trumpets and felt the rustle of hand-spun linen. When my husband looked at it, he burst out laughing. He said, attempting to stifle, "Doofus?" No, it's not Doofus, it's Duffus," I corrected. "Hey, it's in Scotland. Maybe my people were the first golfers." A theory that brought on a second round of one-sided, masculine, Mayflower-festooned hilarity. "It's okay, Doofus," Pete said, wrapping his mighty arm tightly around my once small waist. "You're right. That's actually a pretty cool-looking castle." I leaned my head on his shoulder as we both gazed at the screen. "That's Lady Doofus to you," I said. "Thank you."
If you have any questions you'd like to ask, we have 2 microphones. Please feel free to come up.
If you'd like to ask a question, don't want to come up to the mic, feel free to raise your hand. I'll bring it around to you.
I won't bite, I promise.
How did you start writing or get into writing?
How did I start writing or get into writing? For those of you who are here this afternoon, I apologize for repeating myself, but I was one of those kids with a notebook in my pocket. I walked around writing all of the time, and yet when anybody would ever ask me what I was going to do when I grew up, I said I was going to be a veterinarian. And I did get accepted into Michigan State's veterinary school, and I had my first class of dairy herd management. And I think one of our first assignments was to put on a rubber glove that went up to your elbow and artificially inseminate a dairy cow. And that day, I went to the administration and changed my major to journalism. I did end up getting a minor in agriculture, but it was pretty much plant-based after that point. So I wrote from a very young age, and I think if I could identify one thing that made me want to be a writer, is that when I read a book that I loved, that was when I felt most alive, and I wanted to make readers feel that. I wanted to make people who read what I wrote feel some of those amazing feelings that I felt reading other people's work. There's got to be some writers out there that want to get published and want to ask me how to get an agent.
Okay, so I've been really into writing, and I've been trying to do it a lot, and I'm taking a creative writing class, and I really like writing fiction, and I really like your creative nonfiction. Like, it's entertaining and it's hilarious. And
Thank
all that.
you.
Yeah, but do you have any tips for writing nonfiction?
I was going to say this afternoon, but we ran out of time. Your teachers might not like to hear this, but the most important thing for a writer to have, besides all of the stuff that everybody tells you to read a lot and be observant and pay attention and all of that, the most important thing for a writer to have is an original voice. More important than degrees, more important than awards, more important than, where you came from or who your parents are or who you know, is to have an original voice. So work really hard on being you. Be you in your writing. I think maybe what you like is that I hope that I don't sound like anybody else. I hope that when somebody reads my writing, even if my name wasn't on it, maybe they could recognize that it was mine. Be yourself. And I know that editors and agents and magazines and newspapers and places where you send your work get so much stuff that sounds the same. So don't be afraid to sound different. Strive to sound different. So work really hard on being yourself.
Okay, thank you.
In writing creative nonfiction, how often do you struggle with keeping reality when trying to fit it into like that perfect metaphor or that perfect meaning that you want to get across with the story?
I think that's if you didn't. It's the question about fact versus fiction. As a creative nonfiction writer, how often do I struggle with that idea of making sure I stick to the truth? Coming from a journalism background, that's super important to me. I mean, that really is. I know that there are some writers that don't, that isn't part of their makeup. For me, it's like just really crucial, because when I was writing for the newspaper, you got sued if you did something wrong or you got fired. So I still have that inside of me, and for me, it's that's the first thing, and adding the style and the meaning and the substance kind of comes afterwards. I think it's okay to stray if you tell your reader what you're doing. If you say, I'm not sure how this happened, but I think it could have happened like this. Or you can even say, I wish it would have happened like this. Or if I had my way, this is how it would have happened. I think that's one way that creative nonfiction writers can use some of the techniques of fiction. But it dilutes things. If you say it's nonfiction and you're making things up, then you should be writing fiction. And there's nothing wrong. I mean, fiction is wonderful. There's nothing wrong with fiction. But I do struggle with that, and I'm really extra careful. I'm really extra careful. And if you have a story that isn't working and you feel like you have to make something up, you haven't looked carefully at the story yet. Because the reason you want to write that story is because you're obsessed with it, it's eating at you, there's something there that's telling you that it needs to be written. So you just need to look at it a little longer and think a little differently. If you read a lot of creative nonfiction, you can get ideas from other writers also. So, anybody else? Well, thank you so much for listening to me read. I so appreciate it. You're a terrific audience. You're a terrific audience. And I want to come back in the summer and get leaves from every tree in Michigan. So thank you so much.